when you take the when you take the history of distillation and the work of our fellow distillers and the work of the distillers in the past seriously, without hopefully taking ourselves seriously, you're very careful about the words that you use, and it can absolutely be incredibly tedious. So I actually had Alan, I didn't tell you this, I had another fellow distiller send me a note to correct something that I said on the documentary. And I'm like, man, that takes some stones to do that. But at the same time, I mean, it was nice that he sent the note, and I'm trying to explain to him, if I put the number of qualifications into the statement that you need for it to be accurate, and well, there's an exception to this, and you know, all of that kind of stuff, we would have wound up boring people to tears. And maybe some of you don't know what I'm talking about, but I know Alan understands what I'm talking about. What I'm getting at is there was an awful lot of pressure here that when people were, you know, looking at the rebirth of the still, I just didn't want to, am I allowed to swear?
Oh, please.
Fuck it up and fall on your face and then forever be known as that weird guy with that strange still. So
I think it's funny you asked if you're allowed to swear when you know us so well.
Well, I know, I don't know everyone here.
They're just like us.
You can't ask if you're allowed to swear if Alan's going to have that nickname. I mean,
I was going to say, what is Alan's name?
Yeah.
You don't see that unless you, that's only if you put the cursor on the thing though, right? Yeah. So you're not going to see that all the time.
I want to throw in real quick on something here too. I think it's funny, and it speaks a lot towards the person that you are, Todd, as well, that any other distiller would approach you to say you need to phrase things this way, whatever, right? And I'm not saying that they're not right to do that, right? But again, you know, I think that you've been a big influence on many of us young craft distillers. And so there's a little bit of me that's like, good on you that you asked the question, but also, why are you such a dick?
My brother got the email first because it went into our bulk email box, and he said, "Oh, you're gonna love this one." And you could tell it was a younger distiller, and you know how it is. You're in your 20s and full of piss and vinegar and all that. So I get it, and he wasn't correct was the other part of the problem. But I thought it was neat that at least, you know, I did something that got his mind going, and that he felt compelled to send me a note. Speaking for me, oh my God, I would never do that. I'd be scared to death to ever, you know, it was one of the funnest things. Lance Winters over at St. George, and he's been distilling for as long as I have. And we did our thing. We sent each other notes every now and again, and congratulations on this or that. He released an absinthe. I came out with one. He did an aperitiva. You know, you get the idea. And we finally got to talk to each other in person, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, something like that. And we both confided in each other that we've been following each other's career with some admiration and fascination as to what we were doing. But we both admitted at the same time that it would never occur to us to reach out to each other or to send a note to one of the bigger distillers. And it's just not in our, I don't know, it's just not our nature. It would just never, it just feels out of place. I don't know if it's how our parents raised us or something. I'm absolutely no idea. But yeah, we've been very grateful for the reception we've gotten. We've gotten some really nice note. David Broom kind of blew me away a little bit with the note that he sent, and I didn't even know he was writing. I sent him a bottle because it's David Broom, and I've gotten to know him somewhat well, and I can't think of too many people I'd rather spend the evening drinking whiskey with than that guy. He is just a fascinating human being. And yeah, that one was a bit too much for me. That one kind of leveled my dad. I read it to my dad, and my dad kind of lost it. He's in his 80s now, and he kind of can't believe all of this. Anything that we're doing, I think, is pretty fascinating to my father, and so that I think was a bit a bridge too far for him to read something like that. But, you know, the thing that I'm starting to have to correct people, because we're getting people that are coming, we're just open on Saturdays to come and taste it. They think I invented the still, some people. And I'm like, whoa, no. Or I can't tell you how many people have said, are you going to patent it? Or patent it, something like that. And I'm like, no, I didn't invent the damn thing. I just told you where, you know, I got the rough drawings for to run this damn thing. Why in the hell? It's interesting to see how many different points of view when they hear about the story, what they get out of it is always fascinating to me, as to what they think is neat and what isn't. But there's so many people that just think I should be litigating for the rest of my career or something. I just had to look at it. Well, I mean, I'm looking at them going, it would be my fondest desire for other distillers to fire one up. Why would I not be? That was what I thought we were doing when we started the entire process, that I was naive enough to think that more people would do it. But I'm understanding, you know, as to me, the still is huge. It looks huge to me, but it only burps out a couple barrels a day, you know? So
right.
It's just not designed for massive throughput. So the idea that we're, you know, people are asking you building more. And I was talking to Alan earlier today. Scott and I are in our 50s. We're in pump the brakes part of our career, not in, you know, going down to the floor and trying to be the next fill in the blank. And we're just at this point, and I'll wrap it up because as usual, I'm tired and rambling. Sorry, guys. We're just overjoyed that we get to make this, that we get to do what it is we're doing. In 3 weeks, we're putting peaches in. And I say that with some trepidation because if I fuck it up, you're never going to hear about it again. So hopefully in a month or so, I'll have some world-class distillate and you know, some work to do in the late part of the peach harvest here in Colorado.
You know, Todd, real quick, as an aside, and you know how the game is played. Obviously, you've been around it a long time. You know, you don't have to constantly give everybody the entire history of it, right? So what you can do to those people who say you invented this, you should patent it. Say, I didn't invent it. You just take the Irish and Scottish thing, right? I didn't invent it. I just fucking perfected it, and you're welcome.
Alan, I think you're about the only person that can get away with that. You know, that's not my personality, man.
Oh, I know.
Todd, what do you find is the hardest part to explain? Do you find that people have questions on how it runs, or do you, in your tour, what is the most difficult part for you for people to grasp?
How it runs, where everything goes. Some people think it's a continuous process. Some people think it's a Carter head still. And I don't know how they're sitting that the mash is in a basket. I've heard that, but it's just the mechanics of how it runs. And the video that we put together, we started with the animation and we realized that we needed to tell more of the story than that. And that the story of how I came across it was like a detective novel, because that's what it was. I mean, I didn't just, come up with this out of the blue, and it took years. And, it was casual readings that led to getting a little bit more serious, and the understanding finally got there as to how it runs. But that's really the biggest thing we run into. It is the actual nuts and bolts of what goes where, when, the basic of how it functions. Once you've tasted it, when I say it's an oil extraction machine, if that's not the first thing that you're getting from this, so in other words, I get the top notes, they're much more perfumed. and then how mouth coating it is, which affects everything. It affects the finish. It's a bit like throwing a bit of super glue in it, because the flavors literally stick to the inside of your mouth. That's going to have an effect on everything, the flavors that you get. And when I see so many of the tasters out there do the breathe in thing when they're tasting, I'm like, once I started seeing that in a bunch of blogs, not blogs, podcasts, shows, whatever the hell those things are called. That's when I knew that we were going to be in good shape, because I knew if anybody tasted that way, they were really going to pick up on the flavors, because getting that oxygen to mix in with your palate, to get overly nerdy and technical here, works wonderfully with the oiliness of the three chamber. The thing I'm proudest of is that folks can tell that this is completely different. That was the most important thing to us, is that it hits your nose differently. It hits your palate different. The flavors are different. They come in a different order than they do in a pot still, is to me the thing that I picked out immediately, but more and more people keep saying, that the flavors are switched from where they normally are. Normally the floral's up front and you get the fruit in the finish, and this is kind of backwards. And the whole thing is I think entirely different. And the stressful part was waiting to see is that could be a horrible thing, being entirely different. Cheers. But it seems to have been a good thing so far. So,
as a distiller, Todd, it's interesting because, and I don't know how much everybody else here on this thread has read into this stuff, or how into the technical stuff they are. I know we have a few that are for sure interested in that, but watching over the past, let's call it 5-6 years, as you first started on the internet theorizing about this, about the time that I got into the legal industry, some of my favorite posts on all of the internet as far as production and theory goes is watching you, Charles Cowdery, and nobody ever put that out there that I mentioned his name on a blog, but whatever, or on a podcast, and Thomas Earl McKenzie speculate about how this thing should run, right? And how different it is, and how, absolutely, for lack of any better phrasing, herky-jerky the entire process of running a three chamber is. And so I'm curious, have you thought about, Todd, maybe doing another video, which is a time lapse of actually showing, how you're running this still? Because I know it's not the normal, set of operations. It's not, you got to put some thought, you got to put some concentration into it. I guarantee I don't know this for sure, but in my opinion, when you walk into that distillery, if you're going to run that three chamber versus one of your pot stills, right? I guarantee you go in with a different mindset for that production day than you would if you're running a pot still, 100%, or a column still, whatever, because it's not an easy process necessarily. There's a lot more movement. There's a lot more concentration on methodology and what needs to be what valve when, and steam, etc. And I'm just curious if you ever thought about doing like a time lapse, because I think that would be really cool for people to see, to show how much goes into an actual batch of this production.
We're literally, it's just funny. My nephew, the same nephews that cut the video, I don't know if anybody got that Easter egg, by the way. The reason I explained the 14th floor readings, that I was trying to get my nephews to understand how hard our business is. Those were the nephews that did the filming, and the nephews who did the animation. So it was a kind of a neat full circle. And they had no idea that that's why I was doing that. And it was because they were getting old enough as to where I would take them to a restaurant in downtown Denver, and they didn't understand that these are customers of ours. So they thought, my God, they're the most famous. This guy's Elvis. The whole planet knows them. And I'm like, no. They're selling our stuff. Of course they know who we, So I was trying to find clever, subtle ways to get impressionable nephews in middle school and high school to figure out that their uncles weren't just getting hammered every day, And, you know, everybody's, you know, idea of small business, I found, is what Scott and I call pick. You know, you just go out, you glide around the restaurant and sop up compliments, and then you go home. It's like a 20-hour work week. I was trying to get them to understand that there was more to that. But to answer your question, we're literally in the middle of doing that. We've got a couple of DVD extras, again, boomer humor, where we're adding in the fermentation that we do here. We had a whole section on fermentation, but we took it out because, as you know, Alan, our fermentation method is so different. And the bacterial fermentation that we didn't want to confuse people into thinking that the bacterial fermentation is why the 3 chamber is the way it is. Now, of course, in part, it is, right? But we didn't want to say that was the main driver behind it. So we've got that coming. We've got more explanations coming, but now I'm going to completely rip off your idea. We were in the process of doing time lapse for malting so that people get an idea as to how much work that is. But that's a wonderful idea. That didn't occur to me.
Listen, I'm not ever going to complain, not one time in my life, Todd Leopold, if you ever say you're ripping off one of my ideas, because as far as I'm concerned, I'll die happy tonight in my sleep and it'll be fine.
Well, that'll be coming. We just need patience. The really hilarious thing is that the kid's in a band. So the ability to put out more 3 chamber videos is based on he's just out of high school, and he's in some to my mind, yeah, some of the bands he's in are great, and some of them are, whew, boy. All right, yeah. Anyway, does anybody have any other questions or things that they'd like to? The first thing is, please drink, please. It makes me more enjoyable to listen to after some whiskey, I would guess.
So I want to throw out a couple of things I'm tasting right now, and then I've got a question for you, and just see if anybody else is kind of on board with this. But I've had this pour in the glass for about an hour right now. I've been just slowly working through it. And one of the things I love about whiskey, and in particular ones that will do this, but as they transform in the glass over time, it's like every sip is something a little bit different, kind of reveals something. And so going into the last few sips I've had, I feel like I'm sipping a really well-aged Calvados or even a cognac. I'm getting these notes that just put me right into that ballpark. And I had not gotten that before in the sample you had sent and the glass or two I've had of this so far. But now that it's had some time in the glass, every sip I'm going to now, it's like, oh my God, this is like, I feel like I'm sipping like a 20 or 25-year-old Calvados or something here. I'm getting some of these same flavor notes coming out of it. And like you said, the way those oils coat the mouth with this, and it just lingers, and that finish just stays with you. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Please, whoever.
You're fine. I was just going to throw in that it was funny that Benjamin mentioned the Calvados thing, because I was actually picking up on, and I didn't pick this up on Distillers Talk when we first had this sample, and I'm curious if anybody else picked this up too. So to me, this drinks a lot more like a lowland single malt than it does what we think of traditional rye whiskey. There's that kind of fruity element. There's that rounded richness that comes in as well. There's no dill, right? That's gone. There's no anise, right. That's gone, right? And there's no peppery spice, which everybody thinks that rye gives that, and it's very much, again, as Todd said, about the fermentation. But the more that I drink of this, and this is a problem. If I go buy a bottle, I'm going to wipe this out in a night or two, right? So Todd's going to be getting a lot of my money one way or the other, and he may be the first person I've ever said I'd spend more than $100 on a bottle for a bourbon or a rye one way or the other. So just kind of throwing that out there with Benjamin's assertion too, to see what other people think.
I think you're hitting it pretty close on there, Alan, because one of the notes I get off of this is sandalwood, and I usually get that more off of single malts than I do rye or bourbon typically. And
that's so two things. One, that was the first thing that Dave Wondrich, the whiskey author, the cocktail, he did a side-by-side with Old Overhold 1910, and he got that same cigar box sandalwood flavor. And the funny thing is, he was speculating when he tasted it at the time, because it's a pretty large cachet that a number of journalists split the bottle on, that maybe it was old growth wood. And obviously we're not using old growth wood
Right.
in the barrels. It's number 4 char, by the way, in case anybody's curious. But I had a really nice compliment. David Wondrich was actually drinking it with the founder of Brooklyn Brewing, man by the name of Garrett Oliver. He's very, very well respected in the brewing industry. And I think most of you know I started as a brewer. And he sent me a really nice note and said, this is American cognac, that he had the same exact reaction that Benjamin did, which is, it just keeps coming in layers. And I have finally found a lab that can spread out some of the esters that people don't normally look for. I found in talking with some of the larger distillers that the compounds that they find important are completely irrelevant to me. I'm like, why do you care about that? But everybody has their own, and I'm not a chemical engineer, obviously, so maybe that's part of the problem. Is I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm looking to get more of a spread of the esters that are in there, so I can start to have a little bit better conversation. Because I'm tasting all the things that everybody, I haven't come across too many things where people are describing it to me and I'm like, I don't know how the hell you got to that one. The ones that people have been saying, I get peach, I get blueberry, I get Mexican chocolate, I get chamomile. One of the nice things that Mr. Bishop and I work with so many of these different flavors. It helps you. I make Amaros, I make a Fernet, I make absinthe. When you're working with the same ingredients for 10 plus years, you get to know them very, very well, whether it's because it's in your hair or you're breathing the damn stuff in, but hopefully it's from drinking them, more often than not. But the thing I am hoping people get is you can understand why we built the thing. It really is it is pulling out so many different flavors and so many different aromas. And I'm hoping here, if COVID calms down or the government's calmed down, I don't want to go in a political direction here. I'm hoping I'm going to be traveling this fall, and we'll be able to go over these things in person a little bit more. But this is the first time I've traveled in, my God, I haven't done a sales trip in 3 years. But I think there's an actual reason to kind of do a guided tasting, and more importantly, show up with a bottle of the White Dog. The new make is very, very interesting and helpful. It's a very, very helpful guide. Distillers will tell you one of the most helpful guides you have is the new make that's coming off of the still. And of course you have to taste it every day, or at least I believe you have to taste it every day. And no, I don't mean a half a bottle, but just running your pinky through is, enough to let you know where you're going, in my view. But then you can taste these flavors that are popping up, and the maturation is kind of in reverse for everything else, right? So the flavor issue, in my opinion, or what I'm looking for when I'm maturing a bourbon or a Maryland rye, or pot distilled spirits, it's really the new flavors that you're extracting out of the oak in the first 6 months that you're looking to get that into the background, and that's kind of your control. Or if you're a brewer, diacetyl is the fermentation component that you're looking for. So in other words, it tastes like butterscotch, and you're looking for that to reduce as you're looking at your aging regime. For the 3 chambers still, what I'm looking for is the in-your-face lavender floral note that is overpowering in the nose and overpowering in the finish, to finally calm down and mingle with the rest of the flavors. And that didn't happen until this very last summer. So the last summer that we had, the difference between the whiskey in the spring and in the fall was night and day. And it was totally disjointed. I explained, I believe, to Alan and Christy that it tasted like somebody snuck in at night and dropped 3 Musketeers bars in, which sounds delightful, but not when it's the only note that you're tasting. So it was a very, very, very disjointed at the time. And the esters came up is really what ended up happening. And to me, the esters that I get peaches, I get blueberries. I don't get the big isobutyl acetate. And to me, that's the raspberry, stone fruit that people talk, cherries. I think people's palates are kind of all over the place on that, but the compound is called isobutyl acetate. And it's a byproduct of the main yeast strains that the larger distillers tend to favor, except for Beam, obviously. Theirs is isoamyl acetate, which is bananas. But the one thing I wanted to avoid with this, using this still, is to avoid both the isobutyl acetate and the isoamyl acetate. So personally, I don't get bananas. Personally, I don't get that big stone fruit note. I get kind of red fruits, blueberries, peaches, that kind of thing. So to me, this does not taste like it, what I would call a typical Kentucky profile or MGP. I didn't want to say Indiana, but we've got, Mr. Bishop here, and we don't want to throw everybody into that basket.
No, and just for shits and giggles, Todd, I mean, isobutyl acetate, for example, anybody that's familiar with MGP and that 95% rye, that black cherry thing that I've railed about 1,000,001 times. I understand why people like it, but to me, it's Robitussin cough syrup, and there's none of that in this whatsoever.
Thank you. Well, that was intentional, and there's certainly no disrespect on the MGP side, but we're trying to I'm speaking to the choir here and Mr. Bishop. We're trying to make things that are different. So when you're telling me that it's tasting like a lowland malt, boy, does that make me happy. That is intentional. So not only the 20% malt that we're having in there, it gives it a honeyed flavor, but the way that the esters play, those are the whiskeys that I prefer, by the way. I have to be in the mood for a Lagavulin or for Laphroaig. I did have a quarter cask of Laphroaig with a dinner that it was just one of those days where this is exactly what I wanted. And it was a delight, but most of the time that's not really my thing. But I think that 20% malt really, truly takes it in a different direction. And that was very, very intentional. And the only issue is, as you know, with that, Alan, is how much shit am I going to take because we don't taste like everybody else's whiskeys that are on the market. And we've taken quite a bit. We've had to have, people come in and tastings, and, they don't know I've been distilling for 20 years. So whiskey fans, if they've been into whiskey for 3 years, they assume that I've been distilling for, it's really kind of funny to see, to watch. And it's just kind of, and sometimes the staff will look at me after somebody leaves and are like, well, you handled that well. And it's like, it's their taste. What am I going to do? Yell and scream at them and say, you're wrong to like that. If that's what they enjoy, that's okay. The part that can be hard is that they're implying that you have no idea what you're doing. That's kind of it might have bothered me maybe in my younger years, though. I'm getting too old to care anymore. I'm more worried about going home, and I actually finally get a 3-day vacation with my 6-year-old and my wife. And that tends to be a lot more important than trying to tell somebody who just paid money for our spirits that their taste buds are wrong, so.
This is,
that's kind of the beauty of it, though, too, Todd, is that you're not going to get any more shit than what it's worthwhile to put down, right? Yeah, or at least have fun with it when you talk about it. You know what I mean?
Oh, most of the people are really wonderful, and they're well intentioned, and they're great. Where they'll, will tell me what I'm tasting. I'm trying to understand what this is. It's the ones that come in and fire one down, and then, they assume because we're local that we can't be good. And we've been dealing with that for, 20 years, and that's part of the deal. And, not everybody has seen Anthony Bourdain or paid attention to the lesson he was trying to teach us all, that you have world-class stuff in your state and in your area and your region, and you just got to get off your ass and look for it a little bit. But it's to top it off, I'm not very good at marketing. We literally don't have anybody in sales. You're looking at it. I'm the sales department currently. And so the part I'm proud of, as I kind of touched on before, is that this is much more of a meat and potatoes release, and there's very little sizzle to it. And I'm not going to tell you that we just made the best whiskey on the planet or anything like that, but I think that we accomplished the goal, which is to revive the still and see that you can make beautiful distillate on it. And whether or not it's to your taste, that, you know, I can't control that. So
no, it's pretty damn special. I mean, you're talking about, you know, a different profile from your standard rye that we think of. And that's what, for me, just in the experience I've had the last several years with going through this, and especially the last couple of years doing the show, but yeah, there's a lot of different ryes, there's different mash bills, there's different profiles to it, but to me, they all still kind of fit within this circle of, this is a rye, this is a rye, this is a little different, but this is a rye. For me, this is like so different. I almost want to stick it in its own category kind of thing. It's just so unique. And that's what I find that's amazing. I love the absolute history of what you've done with, you know, rebirthing the Three Chamber still and bringing that back. But at the same time, the uniqueness of this spirit it's so freaking amazing. I mean, I'm having a hard time as I'm sipping and tasting, like, how do I categorize this? Because it's just got so many amazing layers. There's such and that for me is like one of the things I really look for in a spirit. It's not just the taste that I get, but it's how well structured the whole thing is put together, like how all those flavors and notes work together. And as well as just the uniqueness of it. And for me, this thing just hits it, like checks all the boxes. It's got there's so much going on, and yet I can sit here and I'm not overwhelmed by it. I can pick out all these different flavor notes, and yeah, every time I come with a sip, there's something new, there's something revealed, there's something more to discover about it. And that's what I love about it, is how unique and how different it is. Of course, you're always going to have the people that push back that, well, this doesn't taste like Kentucky, or this doesn't taste like the little box that I'm used to drinking. Screw them. You know, you're going to have that. You're going to have that with anything you do. But I think you've also got enough people that are going to recognize and realize the uniqueness and the beauty of what you're producing with this, which kind of gets me to the question. The only pushback I've had from some people on this is the cost. Of it first coming out, which, you know, I also understand running that still, there's a lot of difficulty to that, you know. So I don't know if you want to kind of share a little bit about maybe what influences some of the cost and some of the difficulties you've ran into or problems with running that Three Chamber.
Well, part of it is the secondary market that we knew would be coming, and we've seen a little of that already. You know, where it's already priced at $300 and up in some places that I've seen. We wanted to celebrate. We wanted to do something that was different for the very first release in as far as we're aware, 50 plus years. The price will be coming down. So the first thing that we did was a collector's edition. Plopped my butt in front of the labeler and signed every last bottle. And we thought it was the closest thing to marketing that we've got. We wanted to do a little something special for the very first release. The next one should be less than $150 on the shelf. Part of the issue is that we're a small distillery and we're with small distributors. The small distributors have a bigger markup than the big ones do. And then within that, how big of a distiller are you? And so here, you know, the price is usually somewhere between $225 and $250. And it just depends on where it is that we're shipping this stuff. So the price will be coming down. We just had so much demand for it when we came out with the initial release. You know, what David Wondritz tweeted out. What did he tweet? This tastes just like pre-prohibition whiskey. Understand what our inbox looked like after that happened. So we have global demand for this, and we don't have enough. So it's literally, we'll be going to the UK and to Japan and to Europe and to all of these different places. And we've got a limited number of bottles that we have available. But yes, $250 is an awful lot. for the initial, for what it is we're doing. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. I think $40 is a lot for the other spirits that we have. But I'm running the still. It is something that is very, very unique. I'm the back end of it, and take care of my time. We've got the Abruzzi rye. We're paying 3 times the going rate for rye on that.
Mm-hmm.
We also are the deal with our farmers that we're paying for some losses if they get heavy losses. They don't have the same crop insurance that they do for rye as they do for some other ones, or they can, and there's more paperwork and you may not see a dime. It's a whole nother story. And the starch content, if you saw the video, it's in the low 60s. So
yeah,
you're paying a lot for this stuff. We're putting it down and letting it sit for a full 4.5 years. Most of the future bottlings will be 4.5 to 5 years old. Yes, we are skipping barrels in case you were curious. So we will have 10-year-old Three Chamber Rye, and another 5-ish years on that. I'm hoping with that one that people will get to understand. We came out with a Maryland Rye a few years ago, and I wish that there was a time machine that would allow me to release it at 10 years and then 5 years and then 2 years, because people would understand young rye is I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Young rye is a lovely thing, that you don't necessarily want to beat the living hell out of it with the barrel. And Alan will tell you that, my method of distillation and maturation, I want the grain to be up front, and understand that that's the complete opposite of everything that Malt Advocate wanted for 20 years. Everything that a lot of the tasters, that the first time you hear them ding something, they say they taste grain. And to me, I've pointed out, I just don't agree with that. I just, everybody can have their own palates, but to me, it's like, well, why do we have rules for bourbon? Why do we have rules for rye? If your goal is to make it so it's so drenched in barrel that you can't taste what the hell it's made out of. To me personally, it's that what's his name? Ron Swanson, where there is no wrong way to drink alcohol. And he comes across, he's like, oh, okay, there it is. That's the wrong way. To me, when to say that is the way, I don't necessarily agree with that. If corn isn't in your tasting notes when you're drinking a bourbon, I think that's cause for a pause, for a moment. And the way that we ferment and that we distill things, you're always going to taste the raw material that it came from, because in my training and in my background, that's the point. That's my job. I'm trying to show you what the rye, the Abruzzi rye, and how beautiful it is, and how many wonderful flavors are in there and aromas. And my job is to coax that out. So first of all, it's the German brewing training. But then second of all, a lot of people don't know for distillation. I studied in eau de vie. That's where I cut my teeth, was making Kirschwasser, cherry brandy, pear brandy, peach brandy, where your whole goal is, how do I get a snapshot of this beautiful peach? How do I capture that? How do I capture that feeling? How do I capture that mouthfeel? And that's the way that I think. So to me, it's very foreign. And if you talk to some of the spirits judges and whatnot from the EU, you'll find that they're much more aligned with the way that I think, I guess. So that's not to say that one group is wrong over the other, but if you keep looking at all of the whiskeys that are your absolute favorite, and in your notes you're not pointing out the malt or corn or rye or whatever the hell it is, that you ought to stop and think about that for a minute, because to me that just means you really love barrel, and that's cool. Okay, that bully for you. But that's just, to me, there's so much more you can get out of whiskeys or apple brandies or anything that we're talking about than just vanilla, barrel sugar, you know, to me, that's just a little too one-dimensional, I guess, but I digress.
You have captured that 100% in my opinion, Todd. I mean, you've 100% captured that raw grain flavor, right? The positive attributes of what the terroir and the variety of what that grain is, right? And that's not easy to do as a distiller. You and I both know that.
Well,
and I will tell anybody watching this right now, like, if you get a hold of Todd's stuff, get a hold of a bottle of 51% barely legal Kentucky rye, get a hold of a bottle of MGP 95 rye, and get a hold of a bottle of either my Solomon Scott or the Mount Vernon stuff, one way or the other, right? Put them all in front of one another. And you're going to see a progression. You're going to see something different between all those styles. And what Todd has done is reintroduced a style that has not existed in this country for over 100 years. And it's a gorgeous style. It's something entirely different. You know, it's not out there on the market otherwise. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. That's the best thing a distiller can do. I've kind of got two questions for you, Todd. This kind of backs up what Benjamin was asking too, I think. First question is, and I don't know how interested the group is in this, but as a distiller, I'm definitely interested. Problems that you've run into with running that 3-chamber, right? So issues you've had. So, you know, because I know that you're just like I am, right? We read and we read and we read. We come up with theories and we think about it when we're laying in bed at night. We're up to 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning going, well, how the shit does that work, right? Yeah. So I'm curious, once you got that still built, what happens where you're like, all right, I think I got this under control. I walked into the building. I clearly don't have this under control because here's what happens. Yeah. And then the second question, which I think is maybe a more interesting question for the group in general, because everyone here loves music, right? There's nobody here that doesn't love music. If you don't, I don't want to be friends with you. What inspired you, right? Because I know that you're a music fan as well. What music inspired you while you were distilling this rye whiskey? And I know that you have pretty specific taste, just like I do. So.
Oh yeah. So on the first point, moving the chambers, first getting it started, right? So in other words, how are you loading those charges into the stills in what sequence? Do you start with water? Do you start with water in the top 3 chambers and then slowly move down? What to do with tails? Should I run? You know, so when you're introducing live steam into this thing, so understand, you know, a column still is usually, and I'm not talking to Alan now, you know, a foot or two across in diameter. You got mash that's on it a couple centimeters high, and the number of plates is different for each distillery. But you don't have a whole lot of mash that's in there. With the 3-chamber still, you've got, you know, almost 5 feet of mash in 3 separate chambers, and you're pumping live steam through it. So the very first time you run it is just frightening as hell. And I made sure there's, of course, nobody there, because, you know, the last thing you want to see, if you're, you know, one of the crew that's worked with me for 5 or 6 years, to look over at me and see terror, right? You're like, all right, I'm out. If he doesn't know what's happening, you know. So I ran the thing all by myself on a Saturday the first time. So it was getting used to the noises. Is this right? Is this wrong? Where are the temperatures? How fast? How much steam? When do I apply it? How long do I apply it? Do I leave the steam on consistent during the entire run? Do I change it? So understand that all of these, you know, conversations are going through, and it's why I know I've shared this with Christy and Alan before, but there were about 1 million different places I could have fucked this up. You know, there's so many choices that you have to make. And the one difference here is I have nobody to turn to. Who am I going to call? So running this thing, and of course at the same time, we didn't tell anybody that we put the thing in, you know, for a while, you know, so people didn't know that it was ordered and all that kind of stuff. So the noises up front and understanding when and how to apply the steam. And then the other one was moving it from one chamber to the next, Alan, where you're looking at it and assuming that all 3 chambers are in the same state, and they're not. So sometimes this one is under vacuum and these two are under pressure. And, you know, just exactly like you said, except for instead of it being 1:30 in the morning, lying in bed, you know, eyes wide open, I'm standing in front of the still with nobody there, concentrating as hard as I can to try and understand what the fire truck is happening. And is it's, you know, is the distillate going to be good? Are we going to, you know, just even setting that aside for a bit and understanding why you are seeing what you're seeing, because it's counterintuitive. It does not run the way that the other stills run. And it took a while for me to start to feel comfortable behind it. So the very first runs, it wasn't about the quality of the distillate. So literally the first batch that we got went into barrels. I was delighted with it, but it was the how long. It was the, you know, so you can think the most obvious thing to you, I'm sure, is pretend this is how long it took to run an entire beer well, and it started to do this. And it wasn't because of the distillation run. It was because all of the shit that goes on when you shut it off and you go from one batch to the next. So that was the really, really hard part to figure out. And I knew the still was going to be safe because we put some extra fittings on it. So it's got 2 vacuum and 2 pressure reliefs on it. The chambers are built like they're extra thick, much, much thicker than what Vendome would normally use, because again, you got a 20-foot tall column and it's doing this. I mean, you can't visibly see it, but if you put your hand on it, that thing's moving. So I was never really truly afraid, but you still, it sucks. The first time you run any piece of equipment, you know, you have to hope that those are normal noises. As an aside, Alan, you'll love this one. We had this kid come in to do boiler repair to the blower motor. So you've got a boiler and you got a blower motor that's taking the combustion gases out the roof. Well, the kid came in and he installed the boiler blower. Instead of it going up, it was going out into the room. He turned it on. Flames are shooting out the side of the blower boiler in a distillery, by the way. And he looks at me and he says, "Is it supposed to do that?" And I'm like, "You're the boiler." And I'm of course, he didn't get through halfway through the sentence before I'm running to kill the damn power in the other room. I left him behind on that one. I'm not going to lie, but anyway, you get used to the noises a bit, but it's the transfer. It's the transfer that was really the problem more than anything else. Anybody have more questions? Everybody's so quiet and I'm talking too much.
I'm curious about, so I was up in Kentucky, had a long conversation with Jade Peterson out at Kentucky Artisan, and they're transitioning mainly over to a column still now instead of their pot stills. And we were just talking about the whole consistency thing between a pot still and a column still. How is that for the 3 chamber? Where does that fit as far as batch to batch consistency?
It's in my experience, very consistent. So part of the thing that you're running into is again, and this goes back to why it was funny that that distiller sent me the note, because when you're talking about consistency between pots and columns, you're assuming that everybody is putting the same fermented stuff into them.
Right.
So for me, the thing that we do that allows for a lot more consistency is we ferment so much colder than everybody else. So the bulk of the way that I'm generalizing here, so just let me generalize, Alan, if you don't mind. They tend to like using those warmer temperatures, and the bulk of the flavors that they're getting out of their whiskey, in my opinion, setting barrels aside for just a moment, it is the activity from the yeast, right? So in other words, they're because they're fermenting in the 90s so much warmer, they're at a higher gravity. It's really stressing that yeast out and it's giving off these byproducts. It's very, very difficult to get yeast to act the same way all the time, especially when you're leaning on them so heavily. And by leaning, I mean you're intentionally stressing them out. And when you're doing that, it's very difficult to get consistent fermentations. There's no way that a brewer would ever use these temperatures because the beer would be all over the goddamn place. The distillers don't care because they're throwing in a barrel and making 20 different brands out of it, where they're kind of blending their way out of trouble. So the consistency of their quality control for what's allowable in a fermentation is completely different than, say, Budweiser or a lager producer. They're much tighter in what they're allowing, the peaks and valleys. If you're talking about a gas chromatograph on the flavors, with distilling, you're driving on a much wider road where people, the big brewers like to make fun of the small brewers about making IPAs, because you're putting so much hops in it. It just hides everything. It hides all the flaws. When you're making a Budweiser, if you stray off one way or the other, the beer's wrecked. It's either overly sweet or overly dry and tastes awful. So they have very, very tight quality parameters on what it is that's allowable. Because this is a much wider road, in my opinion, for the larger distillers and a lot of the smaller ones that use the same procedure, they're getting a lot more variation in what it is that's going into the barrel, relatively speaking. In addition to that, they're going in at a much higher proof. So in my experience, putting it down at 50%, which is the proof that we like to go at as, that really, really helps with the consistency from batch to batch. And it's something that I was delighted to have Nancy Fraley confirm, as I was talking to her, that she remarked that I said, it's so much more, I don't know where the hell we were having this conversation virtually, but I said that lower entry proof and lower fermentation temperatures, in my experience, makes for a much more consistent whiskey. And she chimed in to back me up, at least on the low entry proof. So the variability between the batches and what it is we're doing really is more seasonal than anything else. So in other words, we just got our rye delivery for the year and got it put into silos. When we change those batches over, we make absolute mention of it when you get a new crop year, because that's where you're going to see the difference in the way that we make things here at our shop. And so the year-to-year differences, because we're putting all the emphasis on that grain and showcasing the grain. And if the grain has differences from year to year, you're going to taste that. But that's what we want. So you'll notice on our bottles, or at least you will, from here on out for the 3 chamber, we're going to tell you when it is we barrel it, which means that's when we're fermenting it and distilling the stuff off. So it kind of gives you a nice clue. With the single malt that we're making, what we're going to be using on our label, spoiler alert, in case you're curious, 10 years from now when we release it, but we'll be using the steep number because we're floor malting all of it. And the change in the grain from year to year should have more of an effect on it than the barrel to barrel differences, if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the more unique whiskey tasting experiences I had was the night we opened the bottle of this 3 chamber, and Ben and Christy and Drew and I were sitting out here on my back patio, and I opened the bottle. I poured some in my glass. I set the glass down on the table and I handed the bottle over, and a little breeze comes by and just everything out of that glass just blew up in my face. Oh. And it was just an amazing, it was like, is Ben over here cutting up a fruit basket or something? Because it was just wave after wave after wave of fruit and honeysuckle. And it was just something that was a very unique experience, something that I'll remember every time I think of this. And that, to me, told me before I even brought the glass up to my nose that this is something very unique and very special. And everything from that point forward has proven that out as well. But I've got a question, and then I'd like to give everybody else a chance to throw in what they're tasting, what their experiences have been with it so far. But obviously this was a new process that you were having to learn how to use the still. Yeah. How did you have any idea what what your end product was going to be like, and the original thoughts or vision that you had for it, how closely does this product resemble that?
Descriptors is some of the descriptions of it. Looking at the drawings and understanding what I described to you. So looking at that and saying, oh my God, that's under 10 feet ahead. What is that going to do to that bottom chamber? And the bottom chamber is the key to the whole shooting match and what makes it work. So that is what I would not have. So I'm a younger brother, and I don't know how many of you have siblings, but that relationship does, at least in our family, doesn't change. I am still the dumb younger brother, no matter what I do or how old I get. And to top it off, you know, the kid went to Northwestern and Stanford, and you know, that's a tough shadow to get out from under, and I'm still not out, unfortunately. But I had to be 100% sure of what I was doing before I asked that man to cut a check. You can probably guess from looking at the still that it wasn't inexpensive. You need clean steam to run it. So in other words, we had to buy a second steam generator because the boiler that we have has chemicals in it to make sure that you don't have problems with the stills and the piping with corrosion and all that sort of thing. So because you do that, you can't pump that in to the 3 chambers still. Well, you can. I wouldn't advise it. So you have to have a secondary boiler that runs off of the main boiler that boils clean water and runs it. So it's from looking at the still, looking at the description, understanding that that bottom chamber, when you start it, almost has no alcohol in it. Okay, so understand that, again, going back to my O to V production and how important it was to use some of these higher temperatures to run flavors out. And then also the importance of the starting ABV of what it is you're trying to extract. So again, Alan and I, we make absinthe, we make gin. And when you're talking about all of these different materials that you're putting into a regular pot still, they're all going to behave differently. So if I had to make my gin, so those who don't know, I distill each one of my botanicals separately. Okay. So I'm filling the pot with alcohol and I'm putting a limited amount of, say, juniper berries in to run them off. I can give you entirely different flavors until the cows come home, simply by altering the alcohol concentration that I start with, right? So in other words, if I put let's make the math easy, 10 kilograms of juniper berries into this 50-gallon still, and I will get you entirely different aromas and flavors by starting with 20% alcohol versus 40 or 60. And the percentage of alcohol does multiple things all at once, which again gets back to why Alan, I was chuckling at that kid that sent me that email. He wasn't looking at the whole picture. So the alcohol is doing multiple things. For one, it's breaking down the juniper berries that we have in there. Do I steep it overnight? Do I crush them, macerate them? A lot of people like to do that. And what kind of top notes am I going to get at 20% alcohol versus 60% alcohol? Then you go, okay, well, what's on top of the pot? For us, we've got 6 plates on top of it. Do I run them deactivated? Do I run them activated? So as I'm teaching myself how to make gin for the last 20 years, our first gin came out in 2001. I've used every botanica you can possibly think of. I'm sorry to make Alan the focus of attention, but we keep getting back to him. I'm sorry for that. Except for Alan, I know he's run more crazy crap in a still than I have, I think. But because I've used all of these different components and I've played with the alcohol around as I'm formulating new gins, I have a deeper understanding of how that still behaves based on that alcohol. So on top of how much is it breaking down the components, the pinene, for instance, that comes out of a juniper berry. What's also happening is the starting point and the temperature that that is running at 20% alcohol versus 60% alcohol is different. It's going to fill the still differently. It's going to extract different aromas. It's going to extract different compounds. So applying that knowledge to when I saw the Three Chamber still and understanding not only how it runs, sometimes it's helpful to understand when you're looking at a new still, how do the tails run? So a lot of people like to just kind of focus and say, okay, this is how it's going to operate when I'm pulling product off. But what does this Three Chamber still look like after I've been running it for 20 minutes? And this really has absolutely no alcohol in it at all. What's coming out of it? And it's so looking at that and having an understanding, and from running pot stills, and we make a Maryland rye where I can tell you when you bring a pot still to boil, it doesn't come off in a linear fashion. It comes off at a high proof, and then it goes down, 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 down. Okay. But when I'm running the Maryland rye that we make, the first few liters that come off of that still, like literally the first 1 or 2 liters, I always have the new crew come in and taste it. It tastes like I jammed lavender into the condenser. And what I told my brother is, it is going to taste like that first liter of Maryland rye for the whole run. And it's going to be as oily as anything that I made. So that's the first thing that happened. Oh my God, the lavender, holy cow. And as I've described, at least to Mr. Eves, is when you're running the hydrometer cup where the spindle sits, it throws a meniscus. So imagine my joy on a Saturday running this the first time. It tastes and smells like nothing I've ever had before. And then I see that meniscus. That was it. I knew that, okay, I know that there's no way that this is going to be ready. I told Scott on the first day, there's no way this is going to be ready in 2 years. No chance. I could, my 6-year-old daughter could have made that call. That was not a difficult call to make. But it's from looking at the drawings, understanding what I related with the gin, what it means to bubble live steam through what's essentially rye water, for 20 minutes. What is that going to extract? Oils, flavors, and top notes that you're not going to get at lower temperatures. So the still runs all the way north to 220 degrees. And most columns and pot stills you're seeing in the high 180s, 198, right? Right around there, depending on what we're talking about, and yada, yada, yada. But at that higher temperature, I knew what it was going to do, or I would never have asked Scott to do it. So, it was a very, very good day that I could tell Scott, yep. Because imagine if I'm talking to you all and this tastes just like MGP, no disrespect, great whiskey. But if I went to all this trouble and all you said was, well, this is MGP with a hair more lavender in it, you'd be looking at me like I was, not very bright, I guess. So
you're almost combining disciplines. It's almost the discipline of essential oil distillation along with the alcohol distillation.
You got it.
It's super cool, and something that it's really, for me, looking at it as an outsider looking in, what you're doing is the closest thing to true alchemy that's happened in the United States since probably the 1600s, honestly, Todd. And it shows a new dimension of what whiskey and alcohol can be, right? It's taken everything to the next level. It's changing the game in a lot of ways, and a lot of other distillers are looking at it and going, shit, I should have thought of that 10 years ago, right? Which is not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Right.
And I kind of throw back to my previous 2 questions. So, and I bring this up because, again, I think everyone here loves music, and getting off some of the technical stuff that you and I love so much, because you and I can sit here and talk until 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever. But I'm curious, what music were you listening to when you were dreaming up this 3 chamber thing, when you're reading about it, when you're actually running it? I think a lot of us are moved by music in particular, and I think people would really like to hear those sort of things. Something, maybe a 3 or 4 song playlist that people can listen to when they're drinking your 3 chamber rye, that was something that was inspiring you during that moment.
Well, that's an easy one, and you might be surprised by the answer, or you might not. Joy Division. Joy Division, the song Digital in particular. And I'm enough of a nerd that I'm a huge New Order fan. I grew up with all that. Peter Hook to me is a living god, the bass player. If you've seen the thing, the mockumentary or whatever you want to call it, 24-Hour Party People, and God, who's the TV presenter? Invented Factory Records. I'm forgetting his name, but he said New Order taught the white man how to dance. And if you guys can't tell, I'm the whitest man on the planet, literally. Beaches are not for me. But the song Digital, I can tell you on more than one occasion when I had, when the distillate first came off, the opening bass line that comes from Peter Hook, where it felt revelatory, because for me as a kid, so I was, 15 years old, and my music taste wasn't awful. I was into the Beatles and Paul McCartney and some other stuff, and then got into, some radio stuff of the, late 70s and 80s. But I had a friend who was into, that sort of thing. And to me, it was like somebody pulled a curtain. I'm sure we're all like that. Certain bands just kind of, oh my God, where are they making this music? And how the hell do I fly to London? And the thing that I think that's sad that my daughter isn't going to get to enjoy is the mystery of that, because back then I had no idea what the hell London looked like. I didn't know anything about any of the bands than what it is they had. And of course it was vinyl at the time. And so to me, Joy Division was just totally, what the fire truck is this music? And I was actually just relaying this to Noah, my nephew, that this is how nerdy we were. I remember that the very day that Substance came out, so the first one came out for New Order, and the second one Substance is their greatest hits, for those who don't know. And a radio station up the road was going to play it the day it was released back to front. And understand, we're not wealthy. We're not a wealthy family. So the idea of being able to buy something when you're supposed to save up for college or whatever, buying a CD was a big deal, or at least it was for my friends and I. So we had scheduled this a week in advance. We went over to a friend's house, and he had very, very nice speakers. I will say this, that's what he spent his lawn mowing money on. And we listened to Joy Division, Substance from back to front, and an electrical storm rolled in. So that's one of my wonderful, goodness, I think I was 19 when that happened. I don't think we said 3 words the whole evening. It was just magical. So that's a wonderful question. And I think you asked that because you know me well enough to know that I'd have an answer on that. But the opening bass line from Digital is what chimes off in my head in my career when something revelatory happens. And this whole process has been that. And then, of course, from there, I had to sit and wait for 5 years to hope that everybody wasn't going to hate it. When Booker No showed up, that was the slap in the face for me any moment. And it was like with 2 hours notice, just a rep that I know, a wholesaler rep said, "Hey, Booker No wants to come and see your place. Freddie No wants to come and see your place in your 3 chamber." And I'm like, yeah, okay. I didn't have enough time really to digest it. And it's when he left, I know that Christy and Alan have had to hear this probably 10 times now, but when he left, it was, it's, a bit like having, I don't know, Eric Clapton or somebody show up and you're a guitarist and he's going to tell you whether or not your work is shit. You know what I mean? And so
you got to call somebody, right? You got to call somebody because there's no other reaction. You got to call somebody and be like, "Hey, you know what just happened to me?"
Yeah. Yeah. And well, part of it is I didn't really want to say anything because, it was an exciting thing. And I told my wife that night, and I just didn't sleep at all because I'm like, if I fall on my face, everybody's going to know it. And I felt pleased that I have made the correct choices all along. And there's so many places that I could have made mistakes. One of the big ones I had to make was what char. So for me, normally, as I explained earlier, I want that grain to be up front. And the biggest choice I made, or one of the big ones, was number 4. And I chose number 4 because I knew this was going to be pushing so hard on that barrel that if there isn't something to kind of push back and have a little bit heavier, barrel notes from that char, that it wasn't going to work. And for me, I'm overjoyed that I chose that, because I think all of us can agree. I feel like this is a qualitative statement. The barrel does not overpower this whiskey. So I was glad that worked out.
Not at all. And I was going to say, with everybody else, has anybody else got tasting notes or anything that, this has hit them in a certain way that they want to share?
And as far as what Todd just said with the barrel, that's a great example of élevage and raising a barrel, right? Understanding that this particular child needs a little more direction, which is cool.
Kevin, did I answer your question, sir? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. It's been a long weekend and I'm tired. And when I'm tired, Alan and Christy will tell you I tend to ramble. So if you need to rein me in, please do.
No, you're doing great. And I appreciated the discussion of the music as well. Ben and Drew and I are starting a new show coming up soon called Bourbon Turntable, where we talk about
I saw that
whiskey. We'd love to have you on sometime once we get rolling. So
I just think that's a great, it's fun as we get to know one another a little bit better. And maybe this is the one good thing that came out of the shit show that is the pandemic. To me, that's the fascinating stuff. One of the really fun questions I like asking distillers or bartenders or people who run a spirit shop: how did you get here? And I'm telling you, 99 times out of 100, these are just fascinating life stories. And for me, that's the good stuff. And that's why we got into distilling and got into this. So this whole mess, it's not an easy thing to do. The picture selling gin in 2001, it wasn't very easy, but that's the good stuff, is all the really neat people that you get to meet, who all have different ideas and different life stories. And the one thing I did want to remark on, Mike, I can't believe how tall you are, my man. I saw a picture with you and Christine Benjamin, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm not the only big guy out there. So
they're all kind of short.
Is it an optical illusion? Are you 6'3"?
I'm 6'3".
Okay, so I was right.
Yeah,
I was right. I just had no idea. I saw that picture and I'm like, is this, are we watching The Hobbit and this is forced perspective or something? Or
I'm 5'10", and when Mike shows up at my house, like, I'm afraid to look him in the eyes because I'm afraid he's like a mean dog. Like, I want to talk to him and look him in the eyes, but I'm afraid he's going to punch me.
No, I'd never do that. I did. Yeah, Ben mentioned it about tasting notes, and I have to say my daughter's making cookies right now as we speak, and she had to come down for 2 things. One, we're out of vanilla, and the substitute when we don't have vanilla is Cuban rum. So she came down and she added that, and it's my version of Toll House, but we're making and putting a Rolo in the middle of each one. So the cookie dough from that paired fantastically with this rye.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. It brought out a sweetness on this whiskey that was there, but wasn't obnoxious. Like a lot of it, but it brought it out. It was like, oh, and there was just this beautiful confectionery that was coming out from that. And so I'm going to have some more cookie dough here in a little bit with the whiskey, but it paired really well. And I did earlier, I paired it with chocolate covered coconut almonds.
Oh, okay.
That paired extremely well with this whiskey.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we were playing around with, trying to do some sort of recommended this or that. And I kind of went down the cheese rabbit hole. for a bit to try and find some cheeses that went really well. And as I was tasting through them, my wife was doing the same thing, baking with the 6-year-old. And I just had a chocolate chip cookie together with it. I'm like, oh, there it is. That works. That works. Dough, grain, vanilla. To me, one of the, and it's probably easier to taste if you've had the, you know, our 5-year-old bottled in bond bourbon. I get marshmallow. I get a marshmallow note from that 20% malt. And that's the same thing that I get in some of the Lowland malts that I've had, and Irish whiskeys that I've had, that I find, you know, really appealing. And I think it's a reaction of that malt together. You know, of course, the charred barrel has its say on that, but we're still playing around with you know, trying to get things mixed together with it. We did Humboldt Fog cheese. We found, I thought anyways, worked really well with it. No dice with blue cheese, Stilton, sharp cheddar. I'm trying to think what else I have a spreadsheet. It was another one of those days where I was laughing at myself. I'm like, did you ever think you would have an Excel spreadsheet with all of these cheeses and tasting notes together with whiskey? And I'm looking at my wife. My wife helps get people off of assistance and back into the workforce. I mean, what a wonderful, wonderful vocation. And I'm looking at myself going, you're a 51-year-old child. What the hell are you doing with your life? But yeah, I would agree that the cookie in particular goes well, or the one I had.
Darn, my neighbor just dropped off some white chocolate chip cookies tonight over here. I got to go upstairs and grab some of those.
Right. So just tasting this rye and all, I would throw out 2 cheeses going the Swiss route, Gruyere and Appenzeller, to try with this, because the flavors I'm getting off this, I feel like would pair incredibly with those 2 cheeses.
Gruyere is up next, and then honestly, the next one I heard. What can you say that one again for me?
Appenzeller.
I've never had that before.
So my wife's family is Swiss, so her sister still lives in Switzerland. So when they come over, or we, you know, one of the family gets to go visit, we often get samples of, you know, Appenzeller is one of the main ones that we use. I would compare it. It's similar to Gruyere. It's a little bit more intense. When you open up Appenzeller, it smells like somebody's dirty feet. I mean, it's just got that funky, dirty feet. But then when you pop it in your mouth, it's got this incredible creamy note to it that's just amazing.
This is going to be my new opulence, just so you guys know. And Mike and Benji and Christy and Jolie can confirm this. Just like people show up to parties with a list of allergens, I'm just going to show up with a list of fucking cheeses on a spreadsheet. Like, this is what's acceptable at this point. You have these.
I'm curious. You mentioned blue cheese. What about, because I've done blue cheese and rye a lot. I like it. I mean, I'm fat. I like it. But what about the blue cheese? What did it bring out that you didn't like?
It was just the softness of it was making the cheese cling to the palate, and it was making the whiskey cling to the. So between those two is just too much. It was too much. So I don't know if it was the blue cheese itself or the fact that it's a softer cheese. So I didn't move into any of your creamy cheeses. I kind of tended to stay away from that because in my experience, it could be nice at first, but then you were reaching for something to wash it out and not the whiskey. That was my experience anyway.
And saying that, I think a Manchego would be fantastic too.
What would, I'm sorry?
A Manchego.
Manchego, yeah. We did not try Manchego yet.
One thing to try with blue cheese, which is if it's not working or if somebody doesn't like it, blue cheese with a dab of honey on it. So I wonder how the 2 of those would work with the rye. So now I gotta eat cheese too, but
fucking sold. There's another $200 in Todd Leopold's pocket.
That's right. That's right. Well, this is how you get to be 6'3", right? Cheese and lots of cookies and at least that's what I keep telling myself. I'm
37 and I keep trying, Todd. I just somewhere around.
I eat lots of cheese and cookies, and I'm 5'3". So I don't know. It
doesn't
never works
work?
for me. Yeah, it's not working. Yeah.
Oh.
I wish I could grow taller instead of out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just short for my weight.
I live in cheese country and I'm 6'1" and my wife's 5'2". It doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
I'd be happy if I didn't have the gout. That's where I'm at in life, guys.
I can't imagine, you know, people do that. Which one can you give up? Boy, cheese would be a tough one for me. I don't know how you don't enjoy that. My daughter hasn't got the bug yet, but I was taking her to school in the spring, and we were playing I Spy. We're turning on to her street, and we'd been listening to her music. I don't know what the hell it was, and so, you know, we're dancing and having a good time. And she said, "I spy something fat and funky." And I looked at her and I said, "Do you mean Daddy?" And she said, "Yes." And she was so thrilled that I had gotten it, that she had, you know, that she had won the game. And of course, I'm doing everything I can not to lose control of the car. I'm laughing so hard. That was a fun conversation with the wife, but since then I'm still hovering at about 40 pounds down from where I was in the spring, because boy, that God love the no filter kids, right? And
yeah.
Of course, I was telling my wife, I'm scared to death what's going to come out of her mouth in front of other people, because, you know, for me, it's like, A, that was accurate, and 2, that was hilarious. And
well, you know when you're living the dream, Todd, is when you go to the open house at your school and you have to explain to your teacher, your kid's teacher up front, listen, she's going to talk a lot about whiskey,
yes.
right? And if you have to put her in her place, that's okay, because Daddy's not doing this at home. This is what Daddy does for a living.
Oh yeah, one of my sister's favorite stories, when I had those same nephews, we brought them in for a weekend, and we have a very, very big screen TV, and in the old distillery that we're at, it didn't have any windows, so we connected it up to the speakers, and we played. They were 7 and 10 years old. Is that right? No, wait, 6 and 10. You get the idea. But anyways, they came in, we put on Star Wars Battlefront with the speakers on, with all the lights off on this enormous TV. And I played Battlefront with them, you know, when I got done with the working. So long story short, you know, the kid, you know, he was in elementary school where my sister taught. And one of the other teachers brought in what did you do over the weekend? And it was, I distilled whiskey with a picture of a pot still and murdered stormtroopers. And
that's just called winning.
That's what winning. I thought. I'm looking at my sister going, you know, if social services call, let me know. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
They sure seemed to have fun at the time. And of course, you know, they left out the scrubbing and whatever else that I had them carrying stuff all over. They worked the whole time they were there until the stormtrooper shooting.
Nice.
Anyway, I'm doing it again. Did anybody have many more questions or comments at all?
Yeah, Todd, I'd like to make a comment. We've never interacted before, but I'm glad I'm on this this Zoom meeting. I'm a huge rye fan, and I heard the first episode of Distillers Talk you were on with Christy and Alan. And so I immediately said, I've got to have a bottle of this. And like Benjamin said earlier, a little pushback when I heard the cost. I kind of thought twice about it, but then Benjamin sent me a message and if I wanted a bottle, and about 5 seconds later, I said yes. And then waiting on it to be delivered, watching my FedEx tracking, you know, checking that about every 5 minutes. I was really worried that I had built it up too much and that I would be let down. And I will say that is certainly not the case. I think this is just an amazing rye whiskey. And then one thing you talk about the finish of it, and I'm like, by definition, doesn't finish have to have an end to it? Because I'm thinking maybe I won't brush my teeth tonight, and I'll see if I still taste this morning. But excellent whiskey. So.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you felt like it wasn't a letdown, and take comfort that I'm doing my best to try and get you know, the next wave out as soon as we can. Obviously, if it's not obvious, we have to wait for the shelves to clear, and then we'll come in with what we think is a much more, reasonable price for what it is we're doing. And we'll see how things going forward. It's so difficult. So many people, want a bottle. And the biggest thing that I do not want, and it's the same thing that I'm sure you've seen Buffalo Trace and I've seen bottles of Allen's stuff out. It's just you look at it and you're like, why am I not getting any of that? It's so hard. As hard as we work and as many hours as we put in as small producers, the efficiency just isn't there. And it's remarkable how much where the margins that the large producers are getting in comparison to the margins that we're getting, that's the part I'm sure I'm speaking for Alan if he doesn't mind. So we kind of have to bite our tongue sometimes when we know damn well that the liquid costs less than the barrel does, and they're getting their barrels for probably half or a third of what we pay for our new barrels, depending on the plant that we're talking about. My brother still can't get over the fact that we sell $32 bottles of gin. To him, that sounds crazy. To my dad, that sounds crazy. And it's just trying to find an, I'm happy that you enjoyed it, I guess, is really where I'm going with all of this. But if you can't tell, I wish I could sell it for $40 to everybody, and it's just not going to happen. We just can't turn a profit at that.
Oh, well, while that, I hesitated at first on the cost, I do not regret the cost at all.
That makes me very happy. And if you haven't figured out, an awful lot of thought went into this, and we don't take the pricing of our spirits lightly. We have never raised our prices. We've been in business for 21 years, and we've been selling it to our wholesalers at the same price the entire time. So every time we get more efficient, we just build it back into the cost. So I'm hoping if we're selling this in another 10 years, inflation is going to catch up. The part that I'm having a hard time with this next release, I don't know if you guys have seen Sweetens Cove. Mm-hmm. And no offense to the Mannings, I'm sure they're lovely people, but boy, is it hard. All the work that people like Alan and I put into our spirits. The next release of the Three Chamber is going to cost less than Peyton's Sweetens Cove stuff, and he's going to kick our ass in the marketplace.
Todd, I'm one step away from starting a circus and having a traveling lab. I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, it's worth.
Right. It's difficult to watch these things come out sometimes, and also understand, it's just part of the deal. We are competing with an awful lot of, sourced whiskeys, and some of them are wonderful and some of them are beautiful, but some of them are obviously the, Johnny come lately trying to cash in on it. And
you know what the beauty of that is, right, Todd? They do what they do, or they do what they can, and we do what we do.
That's right. So the one thing I did tell, because there's a fairly well-known distillery here in Colorado that sources their whiskey and hasn't been upfront about it, and haven't been upfront about it from the word go, and really pissed off a lot of the other distillers. And I had lunch with two of them, and I looked at them and I said, what did you do earlier today? He said, what do you mean? I said, what did you do earlier today? And then they started explaining, well, I mashed, rye, I did this, I did that. And I looked at him and I said, so tell me we're not the luckiest people in the world. Ignore all of that shit. Ignore all of those things. Those things are going on, and focus on what it is you do. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay every now and again to look at something like that and think, damn it, a quarterback is kicking my ass in the distillation market. The one my brother brings up to this day, and I can't remember if I mentioned that with you and Christy, is my brother for, it had to have been a good 2 or 3 years, would read the trades and would read how much Skinny Girl Margarita was kicking my ass in the free market. He would bring it out and read it to me, like, want to know how you're doing this quarter against her? Because she's a wife of something. She was on that show, the woman who founded Skinny Girl Margarita, and just killed it and wound up selling it to Jim Beam. But my brother would bring it out, just again, the whole older brother, younger brother thing. It's part of the deal, at least in our family. And of course, I'd shake my head at him, but at the same time, I'm looking at him going, well, the part that sucks is he's not wrong. She's killing me.
Right. Well, Todd, and I'll wrap my side of this conversation up for the night. The one thing that I will say about whatever company that is in Colorado is that I've never once seen a mountain in Indiana. I've seen a whole lot of hills, but I've never seen a mountain making whiskey in Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it. That didn't take long for you to get that. Yeah, it's unfortunate. The only reason that any of that stuff is bad is that it makes it hard for the people that are making it, one barrel at a time. And the other place is just absolutely killing it. And every time they talk about Colorado made spirits, you got a bunch of stuff on there that's not made in Colorado. And, that can be a bit rough. I don't care, but it makes it a lot harder for the startups that are trying to make a name for themselves, because they're all lumped in together. And it's unfortunate because, of course, when you're making it yourself, or a lot of us anyways, we're going to make it entirely different the way that than somebody who's sourcing it is. So
have you found, Todd, that the difference between the customers buying football player whiskey and the customers buying your whiskey is that the customers buying your whiskey are interested in how it still runs and the education behind all of that? Because I can say that that's what Alan and I have found, that there are two different people, right? There's people that buy it because they're collectors or they're excited about the label. And then there are people who just want to know how it's made, what temperature was it fermented at, what still are you using, how is it running? There's all this whole education side of bourbon, feel like is rising and gives a lot more weight to the whiskey that you're making and the whiskey that Alan's making than the stuff that's being expertly blended for football players.
Yeah. Well, we bring it up all the time. We get an awful lot of engineers who come by. Mm-hmm. It tends to attracts curious minds, people that are curious how things are made, who people are, who's making this for me, where did it come from, and mm-hmm. If you haven't figured it out, that's my word I'm looking for, wheelhouse. You want to nerd out? Come to Leopold Brothers, because I've, obviously, both Alan and I have thought about every last detail that we could.
But I think that's the niche, right? That's your marketing niche.
Oh yeah, sure. No, it's literally all that we have, and we've been selling our spirits the same way for 20 years, and it's working. We're still in business.
Yeah.
I did have we're back to the music thing. I had a very well-known retailer in California call us the Pixies, as so many other distillers name check us. We're doing a little better than the Pixies. Well, I don't know how they're doing with their reunion tour. Is Frank Black making it? I have no idea. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing, because at the end of the night, so we had a jukebox, back to the music thing just for a moment. We had a jukebox in our original bar in Ann Arbor, and I used to stock it. And on weeknights when it cleared out, basically I would come in and mash in the morning at 10 a.m. and then I'd help, bus and all that kind of stuff, and then close the bar down. And we would put on Pixies Surfer Rosa was everybody's gone, get the hell out, we're going to sit and play euchre. It took me 2 years before I figured out everybody else was cheating except for me, because I'd had too many beers. But So that was really kind of a nice compliment. But we have so many friends in the industry because of brewing, and so many of the friends have either sold, the same thing with distilling, or are in the rat race where they're chasing volume. And so our whole business is structured away from that, where we've got very low overhead. We literally don't have a sales team, and we're not chasing after volume for volume's sake. We're not letting cases fall off of the truck. So a lot of you won't see our spirits necessarily all over town. We've got really nice, good grassroots supports. It's not to say that, but you'll see that we're missing at some places that we should be on. And the reason is we don't give spirits away. Right. And so there's a lot of that goes on. But once you do that, now you're down the rabbit hole of I've got to pump more out. And I always liken it to that 80s cocaine commercial where I do cocaine so I can work more, so I can do more cocaine. You know, that's a very, very dangerous thing to get on, where you're chasing after trying to sell more and more. And so Scott and I learned to be as efficient as we can, pay the people that are working with us very, very well, to keep that number down and focus on the efficiency of the factory as much as possible, and be okay with selling less. So we've never paid for an advertisement. We never went to Tales of the Cocktail. We've never gone to trade shows until I started figuring out that there were cool guys like Alan out there. And I'm like, well, if he's going to some sort of something, maybe I'll show up for that. My experience was limited to the people who were
do it, Todd, because
I know.
Shit.
Well, we've spoken about this before, if you can't tell, but my experience is limited to the people that show up at my door, very frequently unannounced, who say that they are in the industry. And we've had, we caught somebody going through our garbage looking to see if they could figure out what yeast we were using. Yeah, exactly. Total facepalm, right? And it's like, what is just... that distilling isn't just one thing. That's not going to help. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back inside. So we've always been this way of there was a rush for the Tales of the Cocktail started, I think like 05 or 07, somewhere in there. And these small distillers kept going. And my brother and I kept looking at each other going, why are they going? We're looking at how much they're charging per table. And again, my brother, Northwestern econ degree, he's looking at this going, you can't possibly make this money back. No, you're not going unless it's my brother. So I'll always say, well, do you think it's important to go? And I'm like, no, I don't think it's important to go. I'd rather go up into the mountains with my family. Thank you very much. But I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. Let me get the Seinfeldism out there. But so that's what we've done. And so, yes, it is very, very much a niche thing. And it's once we get people into our place, we tend to get customers for a very, very long time, because they leave with an understanding of distilling a little bit better. And I say this as we're not having tours, because I'm not sure we don't know what the city of Denver has in store for us in the next few months. And we don't want to start them up if we have to shut them down again. But yeah, that's exactly precisely it. I've said it on many, many times on tours that I can't remember which channel, but somebody with Discovery or somebody like that would do how it's made marathons. Oh man. And if you got me into that remote drop and I'm there for like 4 hours, and my wife, she'll tell you about this one. She was making fun of me going, are you really watching a documentary on how man-way covers are made? And I'm going, it's so cool. Did you know how I thought it was fascinating, So I think we appeal to that personality,
Yeah. And that's why AMSI didn't care to pay the price.
Yeah. I was gonna back that up. What AMSI said, it's totally, it's totally worth it. I mean, the cost going in this, it's amazing. That's what I've said this on our show so many times. I'll pursue this stuff over the BTAC and over all the allocated stuff that people are going nuts over. give me this, because in my opinion, this is better. This is worth it.
Well,
and
well,
and I'll throw out too your gin. I got a bottle of your summer gin that you released.
I saw that.
That's freaking fantastic gin, man.
You
know, gin is just something I have gotten into in the last year. Holy cow, that's really good stuff.
Gin is what put us on the map, and for many years we were the our biggest customer was London, and we were there weren't any distilleries in London when we started, you know, to the point where I can't tell you how many notes I've gotten from British distillers saying that you inspired me to get into distilling. And of course I'm looking at this going, can we please have our sales back to where they were before? I got a really nice one from the owner of Sipsmith's Gin, which I think Diageo bought those guys out, and they said, you know, it was revolutionary that they tasted our gin. And I'm looking at our current sales in London, which are a fraction of what they used to be, unfortunately. But yeah, that was the spirit. I always liked gin when I was younger, and I just got what really got me to have the bug was the first time I tried orris root. And I'm sure Alan cooks so much he can speak to this. When you come across your first botanical that nobody cooks with, or at least as far as I know, when you get that first botanical that's not really used for cooking, but really has a history in distilling, fall in love. For the first time I put orris root in a still, I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a fun. Maybe brewing isn't my calling anymore. And of course, that certainly turned out to be the case. But our gins do very, very well for us, and we have pretty good representation throughout the country on that. And the summer gin in particular is something everybody, I'd like to think, looks forward to here in Colorado. You know, our winter is really January, February. And when you start easing into that patio weather, that's when the summer gin shows up and it's like, oh, summer's here, cool. And it's done very well for us. And it's a very fun seasonal, no matter how many times people keep saying you need to make that year round. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
that takes all the fun out of it, man.
Special thing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Speaking of which, is everybody seeing all the pumpkin beers starting to hit already? Oh, there it is. Oh, he gets it. Yeah. Yeah. German purity law. So for me, the fruit and hazy IPAs and all this kind of other stuff, I just don't understand. I was laughing with my wife, goodness, about 2 years ago. And I'm looking at her. She's like, what are you staring at? I'm like, honey, I went to brewing school in Germany. I feel like know quite a bit about beer. I cannot tell you what any of these beer styles. I have no idea because I pulled out of the industry. I stopped brewing in 2008 and just obviously lost the thread. And so many new hop varieties came out. And I'm still waiting to get myself in front of a hazy IPA that I've tasted and liked. I haven't run into one. I'm sure they're out there, and I just need to get in the car and go. I'm sure there's some great examples in Fort Collins, but to me it tastes like, and Alan can pick up on this immediately, trub and yeast. So when you ferment out, when you make a beer, you cool it down and put it into those conical looking fermenters, and after about 2 or 3 days, some of the solids will settle out that are soluble in colder temperatures, will fall out of solution, and you'll get maybe a cup or two out of a 500-gallon tank. And it's this proteinaceous material called trub. That's what those beers taste like. It's a mixture of mercaptans. It's just unpleasant. And I keep thinking I'm going to come across one and go, oh, okay, I get it. And I haven't had one yet.
It's a fantastic gut stimulant, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's all that I'm like, yeah, you're going to be heading to this. Yeah. I'm a lager guy. I'm a Hellas guy. And every year I see the pumpkins, obviously showing up early and earlier and earlier to try and beat everybody else on the shelf. I'm just glad I'm not in brewing, and we don't have to deal with this anymore. Just had the folks at Avery come It's a brewery up the road, and asked if I'd ever want to make a beer with them and make one of my old beers that I made in Ann Arbor and go make an ass out of myself in front of the younger brewers. And I don't know if we're ever going to do that, but what I made was unfiltered German style lagers, and which are, still to this day not a thing. I made a Schwarzbier that I was unbelievably proud of, and it, what's that, Led Zeppelin, right? It went over like a lead balloon. It just, I had maybe 2 fans in the entire city.
Well, Todd, that's the fun of it, right? You can get away with
it. Kind of is. Oh no, listen. I was much more like you, of course, because I was 29 years old when we released that stuff. And the very first week of me releasing the Hefeweizen, and Hefeweizen, when it's properly made, it's getting that yeast manipulation perfectly. And if you get that dance perfect, you can get some peach notes and pear notes that are in there that are just marvelous. And when you miss the mark, it still has banana and clove, but it's not as glorious. So you fight so hard to make it absolutely perfect. And then somebody wants to come in and drop a lemon in it. And for the very first week, right? The very first week, I was the petulant child. No, nobody's throwing a lemon into this drink. I worked so hard. I studied my ass off in Germany to be able to make these beautiful flavors. And then a week later, it's like, we need to pay the rent, don't we? You can throw ketchup in it. You can throw mustard in it. Whatever the hell does it. Just please pay our rent so that we stay in business. Right. So yeah, it took a... Well,
that's the beauty of being a distiller, right? You can just go, well, this was your fancy beer, but we've taken it a step further now.
That's right. That's right.
The beer has grown up.
Here's the funny thing, Todd. When we had you on our show the first time, I think I told Mike and Patrick this. We got off, and the next day, our conversation was, I going out hunting, tracking down different whiskeys or whatever. No, I was heading back to the store to track down. So I was like, okay, I'm in the mood for a Hefeweizen or a Kolsch or something like this. After hearing Todd talk about brewing and fermentation, you got me back on the beer kick again. And so
that's good.
I love all kind. I mean, I'm into from heavy hop IPAs all the way around.
Some of us weirdos hate IPAs and like Rauch beers.
Oh. Would you like to hear, if you don't mind me babbling even a little bit more? So my first time so I was in school, and I was gonna go. I had the weekend off, and so I go to Bamberg, and that's where Schlenke is, and they say you got to power through the first beer. Nobody likes the first smoked lager that they have. The first one is going to be crap. So you can tell me all you want that you're going to like it. You're not going to like it. You have to eat it with food, and you have to do everything in your power to get to that third beer. I don't care if you think you're going to Ralph. And they were 100% right. The first one was like, dear God, why would, it's like putting your face in a campfire. Why would anybody intentionally drink this? I got to the second one. I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. The food comes, obviously meat and potatoes were in Germany. Start having a cut. Oh, okay, I get it. And then I got to the third, and I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. And I begged Scott to let me make that, even though I knew what I'd have to do to the brew house when I was done to clean that out. And he very, very wisely pointed at the sales of the Schwarzbier and said, you are not going to make any smoked lager. But to me, that's one of the world's great beers.
Yep.
And it's just an absolute delight with a plate of food. And yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. I'm talking too much as usual. Did we get everybody's questions? Did we?
I just got a comment, on the price. The only reason I could get it in Chicago was probably the price, where I could walk into a Benny's and it's in the glass case, and I'll take that.
Oh, it made it to Benny's. Okay.
Yeah, it was actually, this was bottle 5,269 out of 5,280.
How about that?
So I like to think I got one of the last bottles in Chicago or something, but
those stupid numbers, we hate doing that, because you got 3 people checking you have to check them, because the last thing you want is somebody to think you're full of shit, and you're writing you're releasing, 20,000 bottles or something. But yeah, we made it through. It took us a full week to get through all of those. And I would do the hand signature. Somebody else would number it. It was checked by two people. Check one last time in the 6-pack, and off it went. But
it was down to Dave, Billy Corgan, and CM Punk.
Yeah. So my daughter in Colorado Springs was on the alert. I said, hey, you gotta. She does on a side job liquor merchandising, so she's in a lot of bars and stores. And I had her on the lookout for this when it was released, and she kept on failing. I'm like, have you seen it yet? Well, nobody's ever heard of it down here. And I'm like, Colorado Springs, really?
It's a very, very split state.
Yeah.
And there's only a couple of places. Coal trains, you can tell they're coal trains. That's the big one in Colorado Springs. Yeah. Again, it's one of those things where I, kind of give the younger distillers a hard time who think that, I'm some global guy. I'm like, go 5 minutes in that direction. I can assure you in Colorado Springs, nobody knows who the Leopold brothers are. It's a big state.
That's funny.
It's great. You got to earn your way.
Yeah.
We got more work to do, obviously, but yeah.
I'm very happy I can walk into a Benny's and buy the 5-year bourbon, or I can buy the American whiskey, or
that's the older bottles. Right on.
Yeah. Love this one. And the Colorado Peach. Peach has gone into a ton of cocktails.
It's a simple thing, and that's one we thought we'd make for about 10 minutes. I made that for a bartender down in Atlanta, and it's an homage to Southern Comfort, which used to be peaches and bourbon at some point. That's where, by the way, Charles Cowdery used to write copy for them in the 70s. So it was kind of neat to get some, kind of insider info. And he's like, they stopped using whiskey, Todd. I can't tell you when, because I'm trying to tell the accurate history as we like to do. And I don't have an answer for when they stop. But that's why I made that. And we put the peaches together with the whiskey into used cooperage, and it makes the peaches oxidize kind of like a dessert wine. And I thought I'd make that for a year, 2, something like that. But we were definitely around long before Red Stag showed up. And at the time, the TTB wouldn't let us not put the word flavored on there. And the word flavored to me means artificial. Mm-hmm. So we fought them on that, but man, they would not budge. Once you get a bad ruling from those guys on something, they just won't. And of course, you see all these other labels where there's nothing on it. I'm sure Alan can relate to that, where they're like, how the hell did this get through? And why isn't there a stated distillation on so many whiskeys? And you just have to take your lumps, and it's like, dude, that's so illegal. Why are you letting that through? You're killing us out here with that stated distillation, in particular, that they don't hold on to that. But there's nothing any of us can do, unfortunately, because that's the big one that really gets abused out there, in my experience, more than just about anything else. Did anybody else have any other questions?
We ran into that once on our show where it was, they totally kind of skipped where it was distilled on the bottle. And you're like, well, we know what happened here. And they're like, no, it did. And you're like, yeah, it did. Yeah. and I'm like, and there's nothing wrong with it. Wherever you got it from, totally fine. Understand it completely. But no, I jumped in late, Todd, and I'm sorry, and apologies to that and everyone. But please. I just wanted to say thank you again for making for this wonderful whiskey. One of the notes I absolutely love on it is the elderflower or elderberry that I get out of this. It's just really rich, and it reminds me of when I was in Peru, just because that was a really more prominent note when I was there at the time. And that was some of the other, obviously, rich kind of texture, oil smells. It's a fantastic whiskey, and I'm always happy to get a chance to sit down and have a few drinks of it. And
that makes me happy. Kevin's story earlier makes me happy. And of course, the description of going to sit outside like that by the fire, if my memory serves. Please tell me you said that, or I'm not just hallucinating. Kevin, did you say that?
I did not say by the fire, but we were.
There we go.
We were outside on the patio.
Lost it.
There were cigars being lit.
A dragon came, and I'm sorry, I misremembered. Sorry about that. But
feel free to embellish however you like.
Let it go. You had just won the NBA championship. You were feeling good. You popped open the Three Chamber. No, what I was going to get at was that, you know, who you're around and who you're drinking with is it makes a difference. And so thanks to your companions for making the whiskey taste better than it does. I think that that's it's something that people forget, particularly when they, you know, pull the it's better in New York card, or it's better than Europe card. And it's like, no, it isn't. You were just having a good day and the bully for you. But there are plenty of good pizzas and bagels and whatnot all around the world, believe me. But I mean, listening to Dave when he held up that can, I got that same sense memory, right? And you're transported back. And that's really one of the really wonderful things about our field, is that I get to participate in your sense memories. So I'm excited to fast forward to 10 years from now, and you guys will be regaling the even grayer old man with the first time that you had the Three Chamber. And hopefully by then we'll be enjoying the 10-year-old rye, and we're putting down malt whiskey off of it. And I am over the moon happy with how the malt distillate is going. And I talked about it a bit on Alan's show. We've got the Dunder Pick going, and we're going to start working on that a little bit more in the fall. So spontaneous fermentation, kind of the same way you touched on, using rum and confections, right? Cookies and that sort of thing. So the same technology isn't the word for it. 1800s technology that you apply to rum production, we're doing the same thing to whiskey, and we'll get that fired up as it goes in the fall. It's a little easier to control. But we should
every time we have a conversation, you just get me more and more excited about something.
Well,
you're doing it's
the excitement of making the Three Chamber. Remember, for me, started 5 years ago.
Right.
So I'm already. So of course I'm working on new things and you know, trying to express myself and get a little further on before, you know, Ellie turns 20 and hopefully wants to do this. We'll see how that goes. Right now, this week she discovered Madonna, so we're dealing with that.
Stupid question.
And I'm a Madonna fan, so it's cool. It's just, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, Dave. Were you going to say something?
Stupid question for you. You know, have you run anything other than rye through the Three Chamber?
Malt whiskey.
Okay.
And we're just about to run peaches here in about 3 weeks.
You are? Okay.
But it was another one of those things where my older brother's smarter than I am. When I started talking about riffing on it after running it for a couple of years, he just stared at me and walked away. And I'm like, well, there's the end of that. What he meant was shut up and keep making rye. We need to, and, you know, speaking to the, you know, to the point on that price point, I'm very glad he did that. Because we would have even less on hand than we do now. So he told his dumb brother to stay focused. And so malt whiskey, we've done quite a bit of that, and peaches we'll do, and then we should get to apples this December. We won't focus on that too much. Colorado is a very, very big peach state, and we have wonderful relationship with our orchard. So I truly just have decided we're going to take this where I can take it. Let's see if my skills can get the distillate that I'm expecting to come out of the peaches.
What do you think is going to happen with the fruit distillate? You think it just massively pull out crazy flavors, or? It
should be like biting into a peach. The oil content of you know, rye is 0.5% to 3 or 4%. The oil content of peaches is substantially higher than that. And it should just have a real candied flavor to it. It should be an absolutely beautiful eau de vie. So I have to do my job on that part. and then from there decide what to do. So the different paths, peach eau de vie, I don't know if we can sell in any meaningful quantities, so we've got to worry about that. We can make a peach liqueur, which was the intent in the first place. So peach eau de vie together with a little bit of sugar. And then from there, dropping it into barrels and having a bottle and bond peach brandy in 4 years is something I very much want to do. But the first step is to make sure that everything runs. Fruit is a different animal than dealing with grain in the still and in fermentation. And so I just got to get it all chased through, or else I'm going to talk to you guys in 6 months and you're going to ask me about it. And I'm going to deny that this conversation ever took place.
Did you find
my horrible failure with the peaches? So
did you find any historical literature of anybody running the fruits through?
Alan did.
Okay.
I did not. Alan did. So it was really, really wonderful because, again, at the time, I still say it qualified. As far as I knew, nobody had ever run fruit in a chamber still. And I didn't even get to the point where I could say that. I got on Alan's show and he said, actually, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So well, you don't want to go out there and, make an ass out of yourself and be incorrect. I still would have couched it the same way I always couch, as far as I know.
Right.
But no, in Indiana in particular, for peaches, as a matter of fact, I had no idea that peaches were a thing until, I didn't know peaches were a thing until I got back from college. I didn't know they were a big deal in Colorado on the Western Slope. I had no idea. I wasn't eating peaches. I was in high school chasing trouble, But we really truly have world-class peaches out here, and I very much want to take advantage of that.
Have you thought about selling new make off of the Three Chamber?
No, just for classes. When I go out and do seminars, I'll give this stuff away. We understand that we were around when new make was the big thing. Mm-hmm. It was the flavor of the moment for 0.04 seconds. Like in 2000, and I don't even know what year it was, 8, something like that. And people were begging me to release the Three Chamber the Maryland Rye White Dog. And it was another one of those things where Scott looked at me and he's like, how many bottles are you going to sell? I'm like, 2, to the bartenders who think it's cool for 5 minutes. And of course, never, ever reorder it again. So no, we'll never sell the distillate. The peaches, that's a possibility, because I'm hoping that we can take advantage of the fact that people know about the Three Chamber and be able to move some peach brandy, because that would be kind of a neat. Peach brandy was a very, very big deal for a long time in America, and apple brandy as well. And it just totally disappeared. I'm hoping that if you've had the Three Chamber Rye and then hear, the Leopolds are running peaches in it. I mean, aren't you curious?
Right.
I mean, so what I'm hoping is that, again, I don't fall on my face, and it's what I believe it will be as a distillate. And that people are interested in it. And then if that's the case, then all that we'll do is probably, sell it as a brandy. So we'll see how it goes. It's hard for me to talk in these terms, to folks knowing I haven't made the distillate yet. And yeah. Anyway.
So what I hear you saying is that we need to have a class. That's my takeaway from it.
I will make you a deal, since you've been kind enough to listen to me drone on for way the hell too long. I will pull a bottle from this and we can do a bottle share, and we'll send it to Mike, Sergeant Tall Pants over there to send a bottle to him, and then he can split it up into some samples and we can do it again. But I have to make sure that I'm happy with what I did. It should be pretty, the Three Chamber, there's not a whole lot of gray area. You either nailed it or you didn't. So I should know almost instantaneously what we've got. So we'll see how it goes.
That would be fantastic. We
Sure.
would really enjoy that. But we've had you here for a little over a couple hours now. Anybody have any other questions for Todd? We want to. I think we've gone past the point of respecting his time. But
guys, I'm still thrilled. I've said this before. I can't believe anybody cares about what we're doing here. We're very grateful that people are interested. And my wife was down at my parents', and I was up here at the shop working. So this is not missed family time. So it's okay. It's not okay. A big deal. But what I'm trying to get at is I very much appreciate your interest, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying it as much as I did. And we're so proud of it. I love it. I don't have it at home, the Three Chamber, for a very good reason. I don't need to be the best customer. I think it's a beautiful whiskey. I'm tasting something different every time I pull up a glass, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is going to agree with me. And it's just wonderful that enough people out there do enjoy it. And it makes all the work worthwhile.
Yeah, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I can sit here all night and listen to you go on. I mean, you look over my left shoulder here, you'll see I have a peculiar interest in what you're doing and all that. So it's you know, the interest is very genuine, and I love it. Go get as nerdy and detailed and go over my head as much as you want, because then that just encourages me to dig and to learn and to go even further.
You're going to find other one, and the thing that's nice is you're going to find other spirits. I'm delighted that I got you on a beer kick. That's wonderful. That's
you know, that for me is that's where I started with all of this, was wine. Probably over 20 years ago, I was into wine, and that eventually led to getting into craft beers and then getting into spirits. And you're talking about that trub and that yeast flavor. For me now, a lot of times when I crack open a bottle of wine, that's the first thing I smell and taste is the yeast right off the top of it. And I have to start to kind of, push that back. Now let's dig into, try to get into the other flavors, but
it's not very pleasant in my mind. No. I that's one thing my wife is very sad about. I know nothing about wine, nothing. And I just look at her and I feel like, honey, I've gone down the rabbit hole with beer and spirits. I'm done. Right. And of course, on the other side, I said, I'm like, well, honey, at least I'm not ruining it for you. Because, of course, if I come across a beer that sat too long, or the tap lines aren't cleaned, or, it's not always a good thing. I can kind of suck the fun out of a room. And I've, of course, learned to just shut up and drink it, so I don't ruin everybody. Don't ruin my wife's lovely evening out. But as I get older, that's the more we're just putting ourselves in the hand of the waiter and ordering wine, so right. She doesn't have to hear me, It makes for a nicer evening, I've learned. I'm getting there with this whole marriage thing. I'm working it out. I'm getting a little better at it every month.
That makes me want to go out with you, Todd. Go into a place and all of a sudden, go, what's wrong? Just rattle some stuff on me, and what about this?
That's what the staff does when we go out for something, and I don't answer because it sucks the fun out of the evening. And I don't want to say bad things about other people, man. Life's too short for that shit.
I married somebody in the restaurant industry because I was in the restaurant industry. When we went out to dinner, I wasn't ruining anybody's dinner when I was talking about everything that was wrong in the restaurant, or who should be doing what, or what time this should be happening, or, it's very easy to do in circumstances like that. Very easy to do. And in your head, it's just natural. It's your, you can't help it, but you don't realize you're ruining somebody. Like, oh, I didn't realize we had that out of the server.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I got much better at it. And we have absolutely delightful time now that we go out. That I know not to say anything, and also I've learned to not introduce myself until the end of the meal,
right?
On the way out, just to thank them for supporting us, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's 100% right. And of course the bulk of the people I know are in your industry. And so we would go out to dinner, and they're getting mad. And I'm on the other hand, noticing, I'm like, how many tops is she carrying right now? What, that's 2, 3, 4. She's got 5 4 tops in a group of 6 that just sat. Oh my God. Yep. So I'm kind of on the other side of the fence, because for me, my parents, the 2 things my mom made me do, well, there's thousands obviously, but one was take a typing class. God bless you, Mom, for doing that. And the other was she made us all wait tables at least for a summer. She said, you're going to do that. You're going to learn, what it's like and how to deal with people and how hard that is. I am the worst server you have ever seen in your entire life. If I get 2 tables, I'm swimming. I serve cold coffee to somebody. Like all of the, simple, is it hot, you idiot? Don't you think you'd look? Nope, Todd wouldn't. Here you go.
Yeah, I had to explain to I went out to eat with my dad, and I had to explain why our service was taking a little longer. She was the only server, and my dad's like, she has 4 tables. And I'm like, that's not true. She's got, and I've already counted it out. I'm like, the 6 tops over here, and because she's the only server, she's going from this side to this side and back to this side and to the kitchen and out here, drinks. And I'm like, and when you tell her you want a drink and she comes back, and then you tell her you want a napkin, and then she has to come back, and then you tell her you want something else. I said, you've made her make 3 trips to the same server station, and now she can't get to the table behind you.
I'm the person that gets uncomfortable when the people I'm sitting with start to do that.
Yes.
They play that game of running them crazy. And I'm looking at them going, do you not understand the math here?
Right. Right.
You're never going to get another drink if you keep, anyway.
Yeah.
Listen, folks, I'm going to go if that's okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to me. And we'll see what we can do in a month or so about that peach brandy. And if it turns out horrible, I'm going to blame Mike and say that he broke it. And I'm sorry.
Dang it, Mike.
Sorry, none of you got to try any.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.